Hello? Hello?
Hi, everyone. Okay, um, this is Josh here from ALITA. Hello, one and all, to everyone that's tuning in, both on Zoom as well as on ALITA live stream. Welcome here from, yeah, all over the world. And Now, I just want to thank you for all turning up here. It's great to have this. We're really, really proud. ALITA, the Asia Pacific Legal Innovation and Technology Association, is really proud to be able to host this ALITA-GLH virtual summit together with RSG Consulting, as well as the Global Legal Hackathon. Today's virtual summit will be discussing about the impact that the pandemic has had on the legal industry, as well as how technology can in turn have an impact on how we respond to that. So I will leave the substantive discussions to our most able moderator, Ms. Yasmin from RSG Consulting. What I do want to point out is that if you were looking at the screen earlier, there are a few ways that both people who are on Zoom as well as on watching on the Alita live stream will be able to participate in this virtual summit. So for the people who are watching on Zoom, you'll be able to see polls that appear, and please do participate in the Q&A as well. You will see that you will be able to upvote questions that you find interesting. As for those who are participating on Alita live stream, do go to the Mentimeter link. You will see that the link was shared during the waiting screen earlier, and we'll share it again later so that all of you can participate in the Mentimeter as well. And we will be publishing these results later on. So I just wanted to thank once again RSG Consulting and the Global Legal Hackathon for this opportunity to be able to do this. It's really meaningful, and I think what I can do now is to hand it over to Yasmin, who will kick things off. Yasmin?
Thank you very much, Josh. And thank you also to all of your team at ALITA who've worked so quickly to pull off this event and to put it together in a really short space of time over just 1 week. And thank you to everybody for joining us. So I wanted to start just with a very brief bit of background before we turn to our panelists. I'm a partner and a senior consultant at RSG Consulting, which is the founder and the research partner to the Financial Times for its innovative lawyers and intelligent business programs. And it's a relationship which started 15 years ago, and I've been a part of that for 12 years now. But during that time, we've interviewed thousands, tens of thousands of individuals and looked at as many examples of innovation and change in the legal industry. And of course, that's changed enormously over time, and what's at that leading edge of innovation continues to progress and will, but it's happening at increasing speed. And this may be one of those moments where we see that pace of change increase again. And over the years, we've looked at how technology has been introduced and used by law firms, corporate legal departments, and other parts of the legal industry. And that sort of started with introducing Blackberries or tablets or remote working capability to eventually moving to the cloud. And we've looked as the legal industry has started to use AI for contract review or smart technologies like blockchain to develop new interesting use cases for these sort of more advanced types of technology. And they've developed, more and more proprietary apps to really sophisticated combinations of different interoperable tech to manage entire workflows and multi-million-dollar transactions for business. And the difference now is that technology is not a separate siloed discipline or area of innovation in the legal industry. What we're seeing now is that technology pervades everything, and it's driving new ways of managing legal work, operations, legal businesses, but it's also changing how legal employers work with their teams and with their clients, whether they're external or internal clients. And it changes, really importantly, how legal services can be scaled and how they can be made accessible to parts of the population who can't easily or affordably access really essential legal advice. One of the areas that's also really interesting to me is how it's changing the kind of skills and resources that are needed to do legal work now. So we're seeing the rise in importance in not just legal technologists, but also those in hybrid roles which bridge the law and an understanding of substantive law with technology or data or process. And those roles are legal business technologists, legal data analysts, and legal engineers. So this summit is being held to coincide with the FT Innovative Lawyers Global Legal Hackathon Challenge, which has begun and runs until the 22nd of May, although there are still more participants joining by the day, so there's still time to get involved if you haven't yet. But it's also an opportunity to explore this question of how technology in the law is changing as a result of the COVID crisis that's impacting the world. So we have a really distinguished panel of experts from different parts of the industry to share their perspectives on how they see that change unfolding. Mark Cohen, CEO and founder of Legal Mosaic; Mimi Zhou, co-founder of the Oxford Deep Tech Dispute Resolution Lab, in addition to many other roles; Rajesh Srinivasan, who is a partner and heads the TMT practice at Raja & Tan, and also founded Raja & Tan Technologies; Noah Weisberg, who is the founder and CEO of Kira Systems; and Kira Markovich, who is the executive director of the Global Legal Hackathon. So thank you all very much for joining us. And I'm going to turn first to Mark Cohen. So in addition to the role that I mentioned, you're a lawyer, an academic, a commentator. You write regularly for Forbes and others, and you founded and led your own new model legal business. So I know you've been observing the relationship between technology and the law for some time. And I read this great comment where you wrote about law and technology being frenemies in the past. Now, I'm interested, Mark, have you seen that relationship between law and technology change, or do you expect it to as a result of this crisis?
Well, first of all, a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Yasmin. Thank you, Josh, fellow panelists, and a warm hello to everybody in the audience. Now to your question, Yasmin. So just consider what's happened in the last few really weird weeks. And let's put aside the fact that many of us are suddenly finding ourselves at home with kids, with pets, and it's 24/7, and it's almost like a Kafkaesque world. Everything has been turned upside down. And even the legal world, which has always tried as best it could, to maintain its island status, that it's somehow unique and different. But even the legal world has been virtually instantly and very dramatically impacted. For example, law firms and other legal providers have long really resisted, for the most part, having a remote workforce. It was just inimical to their model. And yet we find that everybody on this panel and virtually everyone in the legal industry in a matter of days or weeks have become a virtual workforce. Consider legal education. Legal education likewise has long resisted, except as additional revenue streams largely for foreign students, they have long resisted distance learning, and yet here we are. All learning is online. Unfortunately, the justice system, which is required now more than ever in most parts around the world, has been largely sidelined because it is not modernized and has not adopted technology in the way that some, such as myself, would argue that it should have years ago. So clearly, what the COVID-19 has exposed in the legal industry, in my view, is that it has turned a bright light on the fact that there is this technology that can allow us to work differently. And it is, the world is not coming to an end for lawyers. In fact, quite the opposite. Many are finding that they're far more efficient than they were. A lot of meetings where they go across the ocean or across continents are now done online routinely. And here we are this morning talking to colleagues around the globe very effortlessly. So clearly what, in my view, the pandemic has exposed on the positive side is the latent potential for technology. Now, let me make one important point, however. Technology is not going to, on its own, disrupt things. Technology will enable new models and new paradigms to operate. And the important thing is for the benefit of consumers, for the benefit of those in need of legal services, and for the benefit of society. There is nothing inherently valuable about technology. I was a former bet the company trial lawyer, and I can tell you that not all evidence is the same. I have also founded legal tech companies, and I can tell you that not all technology is the same. Technology, like evidence, is only as important as the materiality it has to solving complex problems, and problems that are material and problems that are worth solving. So one of the things that I'm delighted about this year's Legal Hackathon, and I've had the pleasure of participating in the first two, which I think are nothing short of fantastic. But one of the things that I like about this year's hackathon is that the theme is not only the impact of the pandemic, but also to challenge teams from around the world to design applications, technology that is going to respond to problems that require problem solving. And I think that is really, really important and really, really good. And then just to close out, I would say that, you know, a lot of people are speculating now in terms of what's it going to be like for the legal industry after the virus has passed. Spoiler alert, I think things are going to be extremely different in a legion of ways, but that's way beyond the time that's been allotted to me. But I would just say in closing on a very positive note, that when we talk about things like the access to justice crisis, which is largely a global phenomenon and something which I think is a scourge on our profession. I look at the work of people like Josh Browder and Do Not Pay. Josh is a 20-something-year-old wunderkind who is neither a lawyer nor did he ever go to law school, and yet he has created more than 100 consumer-oriented applications, most recently in the United States, an application that within minutes allows people desperately in need of filing unemployment claims to be able to do so very quickly, very efficiently. That to me is the essence of how technology and the future of legal services can be delivered.
Thank you, Mark. It's a really interesting example to bring up as well, because it really does sort of tie into this idea of a hackathon as well. And I think it also shows, I know that Josh developed that application in a pretty short space of time, that tech solutions which have a huge impact are actually not that far out of our hands. We with the right tools, the right people, you can actually make quite a bit of difference in a pretty short space of time. It's a really nice lead in actually to bring Mimi into the conversation, because Mimi, I know that in addition to your role at Oxford, you've also been appointed as an expert member on the World Bank's Access to Justice Task Force. Are you seeing, through that role or through your time at Oxford, that technology is being used differently to solve access to justice problems?
Thanks, Yasmin. So I actually want to start with asking everyone who is tuning in to this virtual summit a really basic question. And that question is, what is the image that the public sees of the justice system around the world, regardless of jurisdiction? Now, I think for a vast majority of people, that image of justice is Lady Justice. Her statue is in courts around the world. She has a scale in one hand, a sword in the other, and she's often blindfolded. Now, the blindfolding is an interesting feature. It's symbolic of the impartiality of our justice system. And essentially, regardless of wealth, regardless of standing and your background, the justice system is meant to be accessible for all, and regardless of how much money you can spend on a lawyer, that shouldn't, in principle, be taken into account when determining the outcome of your case. We all know in the real world that it does. And so access to justice is so core to our profession. And I really want to just highlight this for all the participants of this global hackathon, not just to think about how much money can be made from law tech. And yes, there is a lot of money that can be made in this sector, but what is the problem that our legal system face, our justice system face? And this idea of blindfolding, let's remove this blindfold. How can we promote transparency? This blindfold image is interesting because our lab last year did this project with an NGO that looks at promoting justice, access to justice to courts systems around the world for people with disabilities. Now, if someone was truly blind in our system, I could say with quite a lot of confidence that many courts in the world would not be able to provide that blind person with the access to justice that she requires. Technology plays an absolute instrumental role in solving this problem. I absolutely agree with Mark. We should not be just coming up with technological developments just for the sake of technology. The fundamental question for our system in the midst of this global pandemic and in the immediate aftermath is still the same as what before COVID-19. How can we promote better access to justice through technology for all in the world? So it's been really great to work with the World Bank to look at different court systems and different justice systems around the world, and to really remove the blindfold through technology by promoting openness, transparency, and accountability through technology.
Thank you, Mimi. It sort of brings me back to a point that Mark raised, which is, we have seen this, huge adoption in remote working, having to do things which actually have been possible for very many years, but haven't really had that sort of uptake. until it's suddenly been found to be necessary and urgent. And then it turns out that it is quite possible, and it hasn't actually been that complicated to get some of these sorts of changes in place. There, of course, is a lot more to how we use technology and communications and remote working. But in this context, what provides the urgency and the necessity to start thinking about different ways of solving these problems? Is the COVID-19 crisis, that sort of burning platform, is that going to get people to decide that now is the moment that we really do have to treat the system differently, just as, you know, online courts have become essential to
Exactly.
the legal system functioning? Do you think that that's likely to happen in the access to justice space?
Yeah, absolutely. So when courts are physically closed, you know, it absolutely becomes a necessity to really think about how we're going to actually overcome this actual physical barrier. And I know some courts have slowly reopened around the world now, particularly in Asia. But my friends in Hong Kong were sending me photos of these long queues outside the court registry the other day. And, you know, you're absolutely right. Necessity is the mother of all invention. And I think this is really a moment for us to, because of the physical closures of the courts, for judicial systems around the world to really ramp up the use of technology. We have judges who have been conducting hearings, you know, online. I don't think they would have ever thought about this, you know, 10 years ago. And so I think this is sort of a real moment where we are going to see, and I hope, some fundamental changes in not just talking about, you know, greater use of technology, but actually implementing and adopting it so that we can really help the most disadvantaged users of our courts to get better access and quicker access to justice.
Yeah. Mark, I want to go back to you just to ask another follow-up question. You mentioned when you were speaking that it's really important for us to recognize and remember that technology on its own won't disrupt things. And, you know, assuming we want disruption, and I think a lot of us do, but not everybody. What else is required to make that necessary positive change happen?
Well, I would say two key elements are culture and models. Let me take them in inverse order. Models. You know, business models have objectives. They are designed for a purpose. And so the partnership model, and I know having been a managing partner of a large law firm and yet another firm that I formed with a very different kind of model. You know, models are intended really to serve purposes, and you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose and who is being served? And unfortunately, I think one of the challenges with the traditional partnership model is it serves the partners quite well, but it no longer seems to serve either client interests terribly well, or for that matter, the emotional and mental health of the legal workforce terribly well. The profession's report card on both is very, very poor. So I think what's going on now is there is a search for new types of models, new ways that better align the interests of the workforce with the provider and the provider with the ultimate consumer. Technology is an enabler that is giving flexibility to the kinds of models. And one of the reasons why, to come back to your earlier point about why did I say that law has a kind of a frenemy relationship with technology, it goes back to models again. The model of the traditional law firm is very labor intensive. It is about getting human beings, lawyers, to, you know, exhaust every possible, you know, what if scenario. And that is, you know, that's the rubric under which good lawyering is created. But in today's world where business and things happen remarkably quickly, law can no longer operate at the speed of law. It has to operate at the speed of business and society. So when people in the retail space and people who, to go back to Mimi's point, need, you know, access to solutions, They don't necessarily need lawyers, but they need problem solving, and they need it quickly. If someone has lost her job and needs to file an unemployment claim, she can't wait weeks, for a lawyer and negotiate fees and do conflict checks. And she need not do that in today's world. So it's about the model. And then quickly, as to culture. Culture is really about how a group defines itself. What's important to them? What do they value? How do they view themselves? And I think, unfortunately, law has historically been tremendously insular. It has been a man's profession to serve men, and this is just the truth. I was one of the beneficiaries of it. I've tried over years to change it. And not only has it been, I think, very insular within itself, but likewise in terms of clients. I think that it has grown to serve itself more even than its clients. And remember, law is a service. It's a service profession. It has become a business. It's been a business for as long as I've been a lawyer, which is over 40 years. Trust me, it's been a big business for over 40 years. Having said that, I think that we're at an inflection point now where this is the age of the customer. This is the age of the consumer, not just in law, but in all things. And these paradigmatic shifts from the provider having the power to now the consumer having the power has been largely driven by technology and the ability for the consumer to get more information quickly. So lawyers no longer have this asymmetrical advantage over consumers. These are ways I think that technology really can be harnessed, but it depends upon the willingness of the model and the willingness of legal culture to seize upon those things.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I think that's a good point for us to launch our first poll. And we have a sample selection on Zoom, which we're going to ask you to answer that poll on Zoom. But for anybody who is watching on the live stream, are we able to bring up the live stream Mentimeter link as well? So if you follow the link on the page to here we go, www.menti.com, and there is a code in there. If we can't get that up for this one, we may have to we may go to
I think you've got it.
here we go. It's already been run, I think. So all right. So let's close down the Zoom poll, and we'll use this as our sample. There might be some different responses depending on who we have, but I'm not sure actually the live stream viewers probably had enough time to answer this. So let's have a look at the Zoom poll. And so individual consumers, legal tech providers, law firms, in-house counsel, academia. Mark, just very quickly, I know you work quite closely with in-house counsel. They're lower down on this list. Do you think that they will be impacted by this pandemic in any significant way?
Tremendously. I would just add that I think every one of these constituent groups will be tremendously impacted. Everyone. But in terms of in-house counsel, I would argue probably more than anybody, because they are working closest to business. And business right now is really, really in a state not only of trying to stay afloat, but also thinking of assuming we do stay afloat, what's the path forward? And it's going to be a very different path than the path that led us up to this point. And in-house counsel are very much, I think, in the vanguard of change within the legal industry.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm going to bring in some of our other panelists, because we also have two other very important parts of the legal industry represented, with Rajesh from Raja & Tan and Noah at Kira Systems. So I'm interested to explore now what's happening on the law firm side and the legal technology provider side. And Rajesh, I'm going to ask you first, what do you think, or what have you actually seen change at your law firm in terms of how it approaches technology in response to this crisis? You know, in addition to us having to, you know, start to get to use Zoom to figure out how to access our files remotely, have there been any other significant changes in how you're working or what that's meant for your law firm?
Thanks for that, Yasmin. There has been, and very fundamental changes as well, if I may add. The approach that we've taken really to what's happened with COVID-19 is to recognize that what's happening here is a new normal. It's not going to be something that we just need to hunker down for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and then we're back to life. This is going to go on for a while. And it's also an opportunity at the same time as well for us to see how we can make ourselves more relevant and more efficient. But there are significant challenges in this journey. So I'll sort of break my points down into 4 quick parts. The first is caring for our people, which I think is very, very important in this time. There's not enough thought being given to the stresses that lawyers have to undergo working from home. And I don't just mean, you know, the school holidays are here in Singapore now, and I've got kids running all over the place. That's part of it, but that can also be a pleasure in a sense. Let me be very frank with you. But it's the remote working environment. How do we manage that? What we do in Raja & Tan is we've organized various types of webinars which are run by professionals to talk about how do you manage remote working and tips on that, and not just make it a diatribe, but turn it into a discussive format so people can share their questions and get specific responses to that. That was a quick start. We've had something called Crash Landing on You. If you're familiar with Korean drama, it's kind of big thing right now. Which is a light-hearted approach where we empowered our younger partners and associates to come online on a webinar format again to share their experiences. How have they been managing in the current COVID-19? And all of the types of ways in which technology comes to bear to help, in a sense, to mitigate that is what I'll get into next. So caring for our people is first and foremost. In that regard, and we have practice group meetings on a weekly basis. Cabin fever is a reality. Singapore is a city-state, and so most people live in apartments. It's very, very quick that you get to know every inch of your apartment, probably about a week or so. After that, it's all downhill in a sense. And I think that's the sort of environment that our lawyers are in. We need to be acutely aware, because if we don't, guess what? Productivity goes down, morale goes down. It's a non-sustainable work environment. We need to make it work. We need to care for our people first and foremost. Beyond that is supporting our clients. And on that front is where the technology also takes a significant role. Other than the Teams issues that I spoke about for our lawyers, in terms of supporting our clients, we've set up the COVID-19 Resource Center. Raja & Tan is not just a Singapore law firm. We have offices, significant offices in 10 countries. And this resource center is a Southeast Asian resource where you can come and get information about what exactly is going on, what are the laws and the regulations in a single one-stop space. In terms of actual applications, we've started doing our own internal product development through apps like Checkbox. Those who are familiar with HiQ and Yota Logic would be familiar with apps like Checkbox. Checkbox is a no-code coding or development platform which lawyers can very quickly use. And we've used that to create our own employment portals. Because as you can imagine, employment issues are so significant right now, and we can't pick up the phone and answer every one of the questions that come in. And yet they are significant questions. They are repeated, and and instead of having to go through that process over and over and over again for lawyers, we created this portal very quickly, put it up, and now clients can access content from that portal from as early as 2 weeks from now. The checkbox apps have also been created for data protection, related breach and compliance reports. These are activities which various clients have to still continue doing. In this current climate, the cybersecurity risks are significant, and there are many, many breaches that occur. We need to see how we can address that. Clients have also come to us and said that, what more can you do in this time besides the legal services that you clearly are in a position to provide? And that's a pivot that the firm has done a while back, and it came again to the fore during this process. And here I'll touch on another area apart from employment, which is insolvency. Insolvency work is super, super heavy right now. As you can imagine, corporate lawyers are taking a little bit of break, and insolvency lawyers who are on their holidays have now come back and they can't sleep probably for the next few few months, not good news, but a necessary support mechanism. And the differentiation here in the current climate is the fact that we're able to roll out multidisciplinary services. So revenue streams that are coming in now for insolvency work is not just our traditional legal support, it's forensics work that Raja and Tan Technologies does, working hand in hand. So the team that goes in to support the client at an insolvency matter will be lawyers together with technologists who are forensics experts going in there, securing the data before things like, data comes, investigators come in and remove those systems from being accessible, all with a view to helping the client continue their operation. So business continuity concerns come to the forefront. I think it's important we look at work from that standpoint. It's not a self-serving exercise. Ultimately, this ecosystem has to survive. Our clients need to do well. We need to do well. We support our clients in terms of business continuity instead of just looking at how do we help you restructure your company at this point in time. So expanding the perspective of lawyers to go beyond just our immediate usual concerns as legal advisors and having the resources to that was fundamental. So that's the supporting our clients component. And then finally, managing our infra and apps. There's significant work that we've done there. We've created our own platform called Reach, which is based on Apache Guacamole. We built it on that because it's open source, and we're very happy to share the source code with anyone who's interested in accessing it. What we can't share, of course, is our four layers of proprietary security that we put on top of it to ensure that the data sharing is done at a very secure level. And that has to be bespoke. Every company needs to build its own. That was necessary so that our secretaries and our support staff could work effectively from home. And here's where the innovation come in. I'm going to take my hat off to my IT guys. They came up with ideas that many had not thought of before. One of the biggest problems people have today is getting hold of a laptop. If you go to a store and ask for a laptop at an enterprise level, which means anything like 10 units and above, they'll say you've got to wait 3 to 6 months before you can get a hold on any of such equipment. So we said, forget that. We went out, got Chromebooks instead at $150 a pop, set up Guacamole, which runs purely on Chrome. And that was a quick and effective and secure way of ensuring that all of our lawyers immediately after the emergency and the COVID-19 announcements were made by the government to do what we call our circuit breaker, remote working, work from home environments. We kicked it in within about 8 days, and everyone's able to work remotely, full access to all of your desktop applications through a virtualized platform in Apache. That is the sort of things that we were required to do. Other areas as well, like e-signatures, has become great. E-signatures have been around forever. And law firms have been struggling with how do you get people to just get that stencil out of the side of your laptop and just sign the screen and you're good to go. Guess what? Now you've got no choice. There is no physical paper anymore. You have to get hold of that pen. You have to scribble on your screen, as non-intuitive as it appears at first instance. But having had to do it for a week and a half, guess what? Now it's second nature. And then I would expect when you go back to the office and you have to pick up a physical piece of paper and a physical pen and sign it, that will become non-intuitive. And I think that sort of insight is what we need to look out for. This change, this mindset change, this work from home environment change means the whole concept of remote working will become the new normal. People will accept it for what it is. And the old way cannot be the new way, the so-called status quo anymore. So that's just one example I want to share on the tech side. Happy to share more perhaps on the Q&A.
Thank you, Rajesh. So it's an interesting perspective, and it matches something that I've heard from others who work in law firms, but in part tech or innovation type roles where they've actually never been busier. And in some ways, they're in demand to create new solutions, but also a lot of the work that they've done over the past few years has suddenly been validated by partners and practices who weren't fully engaged in using the technology, but now see it as some of it anyway as an essential toolkit to actually continue operating in the current environment. Noah, I want to turn to you as our legal technology company representative here. I'm interested to know whether you have noticed any change even to date in terms of your customers and how they're working with you. Are they demanding anything different, or are you seeing your technology used in a different way or by different people out there?
Hey, good morning or good day. Thanks for having me. We are seeing changes right now. I think there's a bunch of different changes in terms of use cases, in terms of who's using the technology. And it's kind of exciting and interesting and kind of scary at times too, to see what's happening. Kira Systems is tech that pulls data out of contracts. Traditionally, we've had really heavy use around M&A, like the majority of the world's big firms use our tech for that type of work, increasingly also for like banking, capital markets, real estate work. A lot of that work isn't happening so heavily right now. Like we think it's going to pick back up with a vengeance very soon, just because there's still a lot of people that have money in this economy. And in fact, the change is probably going to drive a bunch of transactions, but it is lower than typical times right now. So on that side, things are a bit slower. On the other hand, as Rajesh said, there's insolvency work going on, and Kira is very well suited to doing that. Like we've been ourselves putting out a lot of data on things like termination for convenience reviews and efficient breach type reviews. So there's insolvency and kind of threatened business type work that's coming to the fore, as well as reviews for things like force majeure, right? Like if you were a company that can't, like the reason that Rajesh can't get 10 laptops or 200 laptops, as the case may be, is probably because somewhere up in the supply chain, something has gone wrong, right? Like, and someone has probably called a force majeure. But it turns out that like contracts don't just work, like just because you can't deliver, it doesn't mean it's a force majeure, right? Like it actually depends what the contract says. And that's something that if you're having a problem, like if you're a supplier and you're in the middle of that chain, like there could be multiple force majeure claims potentially going on there, right? Like the Singaporean computer distributor may have a force majeure claim, like someone may be claiming force majeure against them because they were committed to deliver them 100,000 laptops a month and now they're not, right? And then upstream from that, the computer distributor may have a claim against the computer maker. And then the computer maker may have a claim against, some chip maker, and the chip maker may have a claim against someone further upstream. So you've got people like companies who are really quickly trying to figure that problem out, as well as companies on the other side trying to figure that problem out, right? So you've got the people who aren't getting the supply, as well as the people who aren't passing on the supply, both need to rapidly figure out what's going on with force majeure. And I think we've seen a lot of interest in using our tech that way. So there is different usage. One of the interesting things that we've seen is just sort of the difference between in-house and law firm. Like the law firms, I think for the first while, our sense was we're super focused on just figuring out the mechanics of working from home. Like the people like Rajesh were like, I need to get those laptops. And that was like top priority. My sense is like a lot of them have gracefully gotten to that place now, like 7 or 8 weeks in, where they've figured out how to get people working from home and can start to think about other stuff. Whereas interestingly, like the in-house side, they were thinking about like, what do I need to do about termination for convenience? Like I now need to shed a whole lot of revenue. How can I do so? Oh, well, my contracts tell me how I can do so, and being able to go through those and look for termination for convenience. Or on the flip side, like, I wonder if my contract with Marriott is still good, or if I have to go through it to figure out how easily Marriott can get out of it. Like the answer to that is in the contracts. And so I think we saw more steady attention from in-house departments through this, and some of them kind of undertaking some more emergency type projects. Change. One thing we're optimistic about during this period is that Kira has a lot of, so it, again, goes through and pulls data out of contracts. And in a typical law firm setting, my belief is that most of the work and the use of Kira was by associates, right? And they would give the results to partners. But there's actually really great, like much better than status quo visualization tools inside Kira. Like it is a lot better to look at displays and charts and graphs on screen than it is to sort of just look at a Word document, which is what a partner would have done back in the day when I was practicing. And in the past, it's just been a little hard sometimes to get some partners to do that. But now, like, there's no secretary printing up like the Word documents for them and bringing it over to them, right? Like, they're at home. And so I think there is ideally change in how people are interacting with the technology. So I don't know, interesting times. Like, it is, I look forward to things getting back to normal soon. Like, our team itself transitioned to remote work pretty easily. We already had about 30% of our team was remote on a full-time basis before. And we had all the sort of policies and laptops and paperless office that made us transition pretty seamlessly. So I've been very pleased that that hasn't been an issue here. But still will be nice to physically see people in person. I know I always enjoy seeing you, Yasmin.
Thanks, Noah. Well, when we do go back to normality, and we're back in the kind of, we're back in our offices, we're traveling, we're kind of working in the way that we used to. Do you think that we'll have seen some longer term changes? So there will be, that we're talking about the stickiness of remote working. People know that that's possible. E-signature's been adopted, so we're going to continue to use that. In these slightly more kind of complex technologies, do you think that there will have been a longer term impact in how we approach doing legal work, or how we approach the kinds of legal tech skills, resources? Do partners need to engage with it directly because they've learned how to without their secretaries? What do you predict?
I think that it's hard to see things going back exactly the way things were. Like, to the extent technology works and people have a good experience with it, it's hard to see them saying like, but now that I'm back in the office, like, I'd so much rather do it this not as good way. So I think that's going to be harder. And I think the other thing is just people are going to be tech savvier, right? Like, there already were a bunch of very tech savvy people in law firms, but not everyone was, right? And I think like the bar has been raised for everyone now, right? Like, just the least tech savvy people are reasonably tech savvy now. Like, they can join a Zoom call, and they can do tons of other stuff. They can maybe even set, like, my 7-year-old son can set a background like Mimi's. And I think there are a lot of partners who are doing that type of stuff too. And I think it will be impactful in terms of how much people get on. I think the other thing that that I think law firm people must be thinking about is something that Mark was talking about earlier in the conversation, which is just that, like, the technology stuff that you've been ignoring for a long time, like, it really could change the world and, like, your world. And if you don't, like, this is a very clear illustration of how the world can change very quickly. And it doesn't seem that outlandish to think that, like, legal practice is going to be different and that you really need to put a bit more effort into it than you have been. I think for companies, I'm kind of excited because for years we've been saying that, like, companies have no idea of what's going on in their contracts. And, like, we raise examples about, like, do you remember when GDPR came in, or LIBOR transition came in, and, like, you had to figure out what was going, Brexit is going on, and so you needed to figure out what is all your contracts are saying about those specific issues. And people will be like, yeah, remember that, and, like, you can make that pitch. But right now is a moment when, like, many big companies are doing either a force majeure review or a termination review of a lot of their contracts, right? Like, it's just, that is something that is happening and is, like, top of mind for companies. And in fact, for a lot of them, like, if you are an airline right now and you need to shed costs rapidly, like, you should have had that review done 2 months ago, right? And you don't, because you don't have any way to do it. Like, you're relying on people to go through these contracts, and, like, you're just not ready for that situation. And so I think that companies are realizing this greater need for agility right now, and, like, an ability to change direction as the situation changes. And because the situation has changed so rapidly, and they've seen that need, and companies like us who are, all well positioned to change quickly have not been too adversely affected, right? But there's other places where I think, like, spending 3 weeks with just trying to figure out how to get your people online, no offense to any people who have, but, like, that's not an ideal way to spend the first 3 weeks of a crisis, right? Like, you'd rather spend the first 3 weeks of the crisis just responding to the crisis and settling into that. So I think that this brings to the fore sort of something that we've been saying for years, which is, like, if you actually knew your contracts as a business, you would be much more agile So I think that type of change will last. I think it's really top of mind. There's other things like, are lawyers going to go away from the billable hour and all that type of stuff? Like, I don't know if those changes will happen right away. Maybe, maybe not.
Thanks. No, I'm going to turn to our final poll question, and we're going to show the Mentimeter link. So www.menti.com, and you can either use the QR code or you can enter the code 452923. And we'll give you a moment to answer that. But if for those of you on the Zoom, we will use you as our sample in the meantime, and hopefully you'll be a good representation of the whole. But the question is whether you expect to see greater legal industry collaboration as a result of COVID-19. I'm going to turn that question over to the panelists afterwards. Interested to hear your views. We can close down let's close down the Zoom poll and see what we've got as a starting point, and we can have a look at the Mentimeter results afterwards. So I think it's an overwhelming, well, it's a unanimous yes, and certainly the majority expect there to be permanent changes, and of course collaboration is a really important theme for us through the FTIL Hackathon, because we're asking different parts of the legal industry, whether you're in law firms, companies, legal tech, or law students, to get together and help solve some of these problems in a collaborative way. But whether that kind of sticks, or whether that's something we're going to see in the wider industry and how that's going to happen, I think is really, really interesting. I'm going to ask the panelists your views on this, and Mark, I might start with you, because I know that in addition to your 12 or so other roles, which we've mentioned as a lawyer and writer and commentator, you're also the executive chairman of the Digital Legal Exchange, which is a facilitating a certain kind of collaboration on digital transformation for companies. Is that something that, do you see the collaborative element of that starting to increase as a result of this pandemic, or that increased urgency and need?
Absolutely. I think it really was taking hold in business well before the pandemic with digital transformation. Which is basically not just about technology, but it's about a reimagination of the way people can work more efficiently for the benefit of their customers. And so with the Digital Legal Exchange that you mentioned, Yasmin, we are not only getting people from around the world to collaborate within the legal industry, but we feel it's absolutely essential that the legal function become better aligned with business and with technology. So as part of the Digital Legal Exchange, we have people from the C-suite involved, we have other types of business leaders, we have technology leaders, we have people of different generations. I personally believe that it is vitally important that you have true diversity, not just in terms of gender diversity, in terms of ethnic diversity, but you have a diversity of skills. And I think that there's been mention of, sort of a multidisciplinary approach. I think this is something that law has been lacking for years and years and years. I think that time has come. So yes, I think in the truest sense of collaboration, the legal industry is going to see collaboration as it's never seen before. And if lawyers won't willingly engage in it, then I think consumers will insist that they do.
Yeah. Thank you for the Mentimeter results, Darren. I think that just reiterates what we saw on the Zoom poll. So let's close that and move back to our panelists. And really briefly, in a sort of 20-second response, Rajesh, Mimi, interested from your law firm perspective and an academic, but also an access to justice point of view, what kind of collaboration would you expect to see as a result of this?
I think there's a lot of.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Please.
No, please, Rajesh, you go.
Right,
okay. So I think I'm hoping that it will be longer term structural transformation, because I think, everyone said it. It is unprecedented times. When I started out as a young litigator, that was 12 years ago, other crisis in our living memories, the global financial crisis. And I think that marked actually some changes in the legal sector, not necessarily to do with technology, but certainly in the way that the sector operated, and particularly the banking sector. But for our sector, I think all sectors will be fundamentally disrupted, and what we hope is a positive kind of transformative disruption that comes from collaborations that are more than just attending these webinars, and but actually working really closely together to develop solutions for basic problems, as I've highlighted, like access to justice.
Mm. Rajesh, just very quickly, what's your view? What kind of collaboration would you expect to see from a law firm perspective?
I think there's a fair bit that we need to do together. There's a lot of individual learning by law firms. Well, the example that I shared with you on the Chromebooks, for example, quite a few local law firms are literally asking the secretaries to bring their laptop, their machines home. And then they don't have laptops, they got physical desktops. And you saw people, using trolleys and bringing these things back. So we straight away shared our contacts in terms of, look, guys, you don't need to do this. There is a simpler way. How do you get it done? Where do you get the equipment from? Don't look at the traditional means. So just like us, and we're not alone, many law firms are innovating very, very rapidly. As of now, as you can imagine, we're focused really on just getting all our systems in place. It's the same for the other law firms as well. There will be a time when we can come together and share. There are already efforts that the Academy of Law and the Law Society are doing where we have webinars of this nature, and we're sharing more immediate feedback. And so if anyone's interested in knowing, for example, how we set up the Apache system, do feel free to drop us an email. We'll be happy to share, I think, and I hope that same spirit will be adopted by all law firms.
Yeah, great. And at this point, I want to bring Kira Markovich in, who's the executive director of the Global Legal Exchange, the Global Legal Hackathon. And I wanted to ask you the question, Kira. A hackathon is a pretty known concept in the tech world. You get a whole lot of coders, and the regular Global Legal Hackathon program works like this. You have a weekend, it's an intense process. People are sitting in a room drinking a lot of Red Bull and eating a lot of pizza. But for the Global on FT Innovative Lawyers Challenge, it's sort of been extended over a period of time to bring in a different and broader community of people. But how does a hackathon work in the law? And I want to ask you just really quickly, does it actually allow us do we create viable solutions from a hackathon? So how does that kind of collaboration end up in something that we can use, and does it?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of confusion in the legal industry about hackathons. First, many people think they're just brainstorming sessions, typically one-day events where people get together and do some design thinking. And they also think it's a dangerous thing, that we're going to hack into people's systems. We actually got an email from a bar association president begging that we not hack into his computer, which I found rather funny. And the design thinking and getting together, that's great, but that's not a hackathon. The way the Global Legal Hackathon is designed is an experiential learning laboratory where teams can actually come together to build innovative new technology. You can bring an idea to fruition and operational reality in a very short period of time. You learn what's possible when detached from the office, politics, and pre-existing relationships. I think it really opens up eyes and minds. Some proof of the effectiveness of the GLH format is the companies that have launched from it. For example, Guy Stern, who is not a lawyer, never went to law school, participated in our 2018 GLH with one of our hosts, Hill. He was thinking, okay, this is just be a valuable networking opportunity. He ended up placing second in the Access to Justice Challenge, creating Theobab, yes, sorry. Then they thought that they would enter the Hill Innovative Justice Challenge. They won $20,000 in a trip to present the product. So it went on, gaining tons of traction, and they turned it into a fully developed business model. That allowed them to enter the London VC ecosystem, and they were funded £120,000 by Antler. So it is really incredible that we have so many success stories like this out of the GLH. So to answer your question, yes, you can really develop a viable solution in this type of format and time frame.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Kira. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to ALITA for putting this on. And for anybody out there who's interested in participating in the hackathon and is not yet, please do. It's still open for participants to register between now and the 22nd of May when the final submissions are due. Thank you very much. And I think that's where we'll close it. Bye.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks all. Thanks, Yasmin. Thanks so much. That was great moderation.
Thank you, everybody.
That was fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Keep well, everyone.
Bye-bye. Stay
Bye.
well, stay healthy.
Yes.